My paranormal experiences are different. I have several leading up to my present time. They started when I was a child. They progressed in a way that they were very benign in the beginning, and they became very fearful and terrifying toward the end. And so far, I've been very lucky. I haven't had to rush out of a house or call a pastor or do anything further than what I've already done. But just a little background is I am a Wisconsinite. You can probably tell by the accent. I grew up in a little town called Fond du Lac, and it is in the middle of a place called the Kettle Moraine. For people who know about Dogmen, it's in the heart of Dogmen area, and it's beautiful. Just beautiful. It's lakes and forests and farmland and these gorgeous farms and old decrepit farms. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a photographer's dream. If you want to go and see a little town that time forgot, you want to go into a tavern, it's the perfect place. It's wonderful. And I loved it. I really did. It's interesting in that it's part of the kettle it sits in is surrounded by limestone. And a lot of people know that limestone is a good conductor for spiritual energy. And it seems as though that area has a lot of spiritual energy. A lot of people, friends of mine, friends of my family, have had interesting things going on, and everybody in town, in my little town, seems to know, oh, that house, yeah, we know, the painted lady, in other words, a Victorian home that's been painted in its gaudy colors. Oh yeah, the painted lady. Yeah, we don't want to go in there. Yeah, we know all about that house. So-and-so committed suicide in that house and he's still there. And it's very well known. I mean, everybody knows where the spots are. So people tend to stay away from those spots. And we have a lot of cemeteries and a lot of old cemeteries. It's an old city. I would say it's probably early 1800s, as I remember, which for that area is pretty old. And it sits at the bottom of Lake Winnebago, which is a beautiful lake. And it's about an hour north of Milwaukee to get an idea. It's kind of hard to get an idea of where it is. But it is. It's a beautiful, beautiful state and a beautiful area to be in. It's a funny place because it's small in the way that everybody in town knows everybody else, and then everybody in everybody else's town knows somebody in that town. For example, we had tons of relatives in Sheboygan, which it seems like everybody knows about. And you took a little state highway to get there. And that's right on the shore of Lake Michigan. It was very interesting because there are several little towns along the way, and there's one in particular that is very famous for their cemetery. It's considered one of the most haunted cemeteries in the country. It also has a beautiful mill pond, and my family settled there in the early 1800s. They had a cheese factory. Of course, what else would you have in Wisconsin? Both sides actually settled there. I almost hate to give the name of it out because I don't want anybody to go there. It's so quaint and beautiful and pastoral. It has a lot of folklore surrounding it, and there is a nearby town called Greenbush, and it also is considered very spiritual, haunted. Its claim to fame, I think President Lincoln slept there. It's like I said, these are little towns, little old-fashioned towns. The highway just barely goes through them. I came through Greenbush. I was on my way to Sheboygan, and I drove right into a parade. I didn't realize it was the 4th of July. And all of a sudden, there were these 4 old men carrying flags. And I thought, oh my God. So you just don't know what's going to come up. So it's just a really neat place to be from and to drive around and to explore. I just loved it. I just loved it. I was married very early and in Wisconsin. My whole family lived there. Everybody lived there right around in that area. And I had an uncle who was a water dowser. It was amazing to watch. He had a hickory dowsing stick, and that was his living. And he dowsed for water. And he was very successful. So it was almost like things like that were running through my family. Different things, spiritual things, different kinds of occupations, things that weren't just cut and dried. It's really hard to explain. Going back to that area, the little town area, there's a cemetery up in that area, and I wanted to go up the path to the cemetery so bad. I was sitting at the mill pond, and I wanted to go up to the path, and it was a beautiful path, and it's a beautiful cemetery. Very old. Nobody's buried there anymore. And I couldn't go up. I just couldn't go up. Something told me, do not go up that path. It was very interesting. And I did go once, and my sister and my mom stayed in the car. They wouldn't get out of the car. But it's a very interesting area. And my uncle, the water dowser, lived in that area too. So all along that area, I had family. And I think my first real paranormal experience came when I was at my grandparents' home, and they were out. And my Aunt Helen came in and tucked me back into bed. I think I was about 7, and I kind of squirmed around and I got comfortable, and it was really nice. And she gave me a kiss, and she had been dead for 3 years, but it didn't dawn on me. I mean, I was 7. What do you think? But she was a wonderful lady, and it was not an unnatural thing to see her there, sitting there. I can still see her sitting on the side of the bed in her dress and her glasses, and she had an old-fashioned hearing aid, and she was just sitting there and smiling and covering me up, and it was just a wonderful experience. And I hear this spoken about a lot, and I don't know if other people hear about it, but my whole family hears this constantly. We hear people in our ear, yelling in our ear all the time, whether we're drifting off to sleep, whether we're asleep and they wake us up. And it's like they wake you up and you go, what? What do you want? And it kind of makes you crabby because that's all you hear. They'll yell in your ear really loud, or they'll yell in your ear and then they'll speak really fast. And I've heard that on the spirit level, they speak at a higher frequency. So they'll speak really fast and you can't catch it. You try and catch it, but you can't. So all of us hear that. I have 2 sisters, my mother, and we all hear that. And it doesn't go away. In fact, my mom just the other night heard someone announce her mother's name, and she just sat bolt upright. I mean, it's just always been in our family. And I don't know if many others, I always ask people, well, do you hear that? Does that come through to you? Do you hear that? No, not really. Well, once in a while. I've heard that all my life. And sometimes it's male, sometimes it's female. It just, I don't know. I guess maybe they take turns. I'm not really sure. But it's always been that way. We've always heard it. It's never gone away. And in my childhood, people talk about Ouija boards. Oh my God, I hear about Ouija boards in every show on everything. And I hear pros and cons, and my friends talk about them, and whether they try and burn them, whether they try and throw them away, whatever they do. And when we were kids, it was the 60s, and it was big. Ouija boards were big. So one Christmas, my folks bought me a Ouija board, and, open up the Ouija board. I don't know, I was probably 11 or something. We would play with it. We kids would play with it. And I remember one time, oh, you kids, go play with your Ouija board. We're getting ready for our cocktail party. I mean, it was like nothing. You didn't know. So we'd sit there with the planchette and we'd play around with it. I don't think anything ever happened, thank God, but ignorance is bliss, I guess. We didn't know. We just sat there. We'd go up into our attic, which was a stairway. It was not a pull-down ladder. It was a regular stairway that you walked up and had a landing and then walked up again. It was a big house. And we'd sit up there and play with the Ouija board. And we never thought anything of it. I don't know. I still don't know. I still don't know how I feel about that. I hear so many different opinions. It's very strange. I don't know. I don't know how people feel about it. I guess most of my friends will not touch it. I don't know. And then I hear people say, oh, just play it. Don't worry about it. Be done with it. And then others say, oh, no, we see this, that, or the other thing coming out of it. So who knows? But when I was a kid, again, still, my grandmother and I were really, really close. And I loved her more than anything. I hope my mom doesn't hear this. And I could do no wrong. I could do no wrong in my grandparents' eyes, both my grandfather and my grandmother. And this was on my mother's side. They were wonderful people. They were just wonderful. And they were both in ill health. They lived in Sheboygan. So we traveled a lot to Sheboygan. And if you've ever heard of Kohler, well, that's where Sheboygan is close to. And we would travel there. We would stay for the summers. We would just have a great time. My grandmother would take us, we'd go down to the basement, and she would have the old treadle sewing machine that I'm looking at right now because I have it. She had a Victrola that I'm looking at right now because I have it. I was pulled out of school one day to find out that my grandfather had died in his sleep. He had heart problems. And of course, we kids did not know, did not understand what heart problems were. We were still young, and all we knew is he took nitro pills. That's all we knew. When he got upset, he'd pop a nitro pill. We didn't know. And he died in his sleep. And he died while my grandmother was in the hospital battling cancer, which I just can't even comprehend that. I mean, she was really sick. So he, of course, had his wake, and they wheeled my grandmother into the funeral home, and I can still see her leaning over the coffin. She was in her wheelchair and crying, and it was a very horrible, horrible time. And she lived, I think, maybe 3 or 4 years after he passed away. And, well, I'll tell you, She was the strongest woman in our family. She had a child, my mom's sister, who passed away. This is going way back, who died when she fell into a vat of boiling water on Christmas Eve and died on Christmas Day. And like I said, this is going way back, so I'm jumping around a little bit. And my grandma got through it. I don't know how she did it. I don't know. Talk about a strong woman. But anyway, she put her husband to rest, and then she passed away about 4 years later, cancer. After my grandmother passed away, I got a phone call saying, "Hi, Tara." And that's how she always, when I picked up the phone, that's what she always said, "Hi, Tara." Then the line went dead. And I knew it was her. I mean, nobody else would say that to me. So I knew it was her. And my older sister wasn't able to come to the funeral because she had already moved out to Arizona. And she had a dream. She said, Grandma came to me. She'd known, of course, that she had passed away. And she was wearing a mint-colored dress. And that was what she was buried in. And she didn't know at the time. So if people wonder, what happens, or there is nothing, there is something, definitely. Oh, I definitely believe in it. There is so much proof out there. So after that happened, shortly after that happened, after my grandmother passed away, my mom's brother was killed in a head-on car crash. And my mom basically lost her whole family within just a few years. And after that, we all moved. My younger sister, her husband, my husband, myself, all moved to Phoenix. And that was the biggest, harshest, scariest culture shock ever. We moved basically because it was early 80s and there were no real jobs to be had in Wisconsin. I mean, it was the recession. It was the Great Recession, and people were having a really difficult time, and Arizona was booming, and my older sister was already out in Arizona, so we thought, well, we might as well stick together because we were dwindling. And my dad's side of the family was a different story. We were pretty much estranged. So we all moved out to Arizona, which was so shocking and so difficult. I mean, everybody has walls around their homes. The walls are usually 6 feet high, and they're stucco, and you don't know who your neighbor is. I have no idea who my neighbors are. In the 30 years I've lived here, I have no idea. I mean, I've moved around from home to home. I have no idea who they are. I don't even know what cars they drive. Nobody sees anybody. There's nothing such as a backyard. I mean, if there is a backyard, which you might be able to see over the wall, there's nobody back there. I mean, you just don't see it. And of course, it's 175 degrees most of the time, so you don't see it. It was very, very difficult, very harsh to get used to, very hard. And I was just distraught. I was just beside myself. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just didn't. There was my grandmother, back in Wisconsin, passed away. What was I going to do? What was I going to do? I couldn't go to the cemetery. What was I going to do? I sat there. I just sat in the apartment. My husband and I, when we moved out, we were newly married. We were able to get into an apartment, and I didn't know what to do. I remember I was just crying and literally wandering around in my apartment, crying for my grandma, when I walked over to the Victrola she had given me, and we had a ton of records, and she had a favorite record, and it was called The Grass is Always Greener. And she would show us how she danced when she was in her 20s. And the records, there were hundreds of them in the Victrola. And so I opened up the Victrola. I thought, oh, there'll be some comfort. I'll put on a record. And I pulled out that record. I mean, there is no way I could have found that record on purpose. There were hundreds of them, and they were all in wrappers, and there's no way. So, I knew she was there, but it still didn't make any difference because it was so terribly hard. It was so terribly hard. And of course, I still have the Victrola looking over at it. It's beautiful. And I still have the record, all of the records. And of course, a sewing machine, which still works, but my sister sewed her hair into the machine, so nobody sews on it. And I just felt completely adrift. I didn't know what to do. I was working as a receptionist. My husband was working, and we all found jobs right away. I mean, that is one thing. Arizona boy, they had jobs. We could work. And in the apartment, one night I woke up and I found a man standing in the doorway in a stereotypical opera outfit, top hat, cape, cane, Dracula type of outfit, just standing there in my doorway, grinning at me. And I was fully awake. I mean, I touched myself. I pinched myself. And I was elbowing my husband, who, he didn't wake up. He was just, he could sleep through anything. And this was no sleep paralysis. And for everything I hear, I'm not sure I even believe in that anyway, sleep paralysis. I don't know if I believe in that. He let me know in my head that he was the devil himself. And then he faded away. And I don't know if he was just, pulling my leg at that point, but he looked like he could be the devil himself. He wasn't red, he didn't have horns, but he was dressed as though he had just come from the opera, and he was smiling at me, just grinning at me, and he was looking straight at me. I was awake. There was no such thing as sleep paralysis, and I've never had it. And I just can't wrap my head around that. So we saved our money. In the first few years, we bought a new house and decorated our house. And I had a really pretty candy dish on the end table in the living room that one of my aunts had gotten me for my wedding. My grandma hated that aunt. She hated her. And one day I found that candy dish upside down underneath the end table, and I had hardwood floors. Now there's no way on earth that could have happened. She hated that, my aunt. She hated her. So I put that candy dish away. That was gone. I know. That was never going to be shown again. And I also had, it was an older home, and I had a little cut glass square in the wall, and it showed our address. And I had kind of stuffed like a figurine in the back of it. I really had to stuff it in there. And because it was pretty, and I wanted it to the sun to shine through it. And then I put a Hummel figure in front of it, and it was kind of wobbly. It didn't fit really well in there. But the Hummel was given to me by my grandmother, and I wanted to show it off. And one day I came home, and the thing that I had really wedged in there was given to me by the same aunt, was broken into 1,000 pieces, but the Hummel had stayed perfectly. That was swept up, gone. Everything given to me from the aunt was gone. That was thrown out. And nothing ever happened after that. Nothing was ever bothered. Once I got rid of everything from the end, it was gone. Anything that was smashed or anything, that was gone. But then I had things that started in that house. And faucets were being turned on, turned off, chairs were being moved. I felt things, but I didn't see anything. It was weird. I felt things and I didn't feel good things. So I knew it wasn't my family. It was not my family. At this point, my husband and I separated and divorced, and it was in the heyday of travel agencies. And I had been a travel agent, so I moved up to a little town called Carefree, which was about 20 miles away from Phoenix, and I opened my own travel agency. And let me tell you, Carefree, and then there's a little town called Cave Creek, which is right next to Carefree, is haunted cities. I mean, they are haunted. There are lots of experiences. Carefree, things get really stirred up there. It was not developed until the 50s. So it was Native American land. It was settler land. It was really kind of a scary land. You know, I had clients who would tell me, oh, we just redid our den, and I was sitting there and I was having a drink and I was watching TV, and a man in 1880s cowboy gear came through the wall, walked through my den, and went through the other wall. And that happened a lot. People would tell me things like that, and I was not surprised. I was not surprised at all. And another client said, God, we have this house. We can't sell it. I feel so bad. It's a beautiful home, but we have these people who come into the house and they're crying and they're wailing and they're crying. They have cholera and they want water, and they were trying to get to Phoenix and they never made it to Phoenix. And they're just crying and sick, and we can't sell the house because we can't do that to anybody. So they did end up selling the house to a commercial realtor who turned that area into a strip mall. So it was closed at night. They were happy with that because they would just not at all sell it to anybody in residential real estate. It's just too scary. And this was not an unusual thing that would happen. In fact, when I bought a house or any house up in that area, I would always say, has anyone died in this house? No, nobody's died in the house. Is the house haunted? No, the house is not haunted. I said, you better be sure, because I bring my people with me. I don't want your people hanging around. I have enough of my own people who are coming with me. And I always did. I always had my own people. So by then I was kind of settled in and everything was going well. I had my travel agency and I happened to meet a dear friend of mine. We became really close. She just happened to be an evidential medium, and she lived across the parking lot, or her office was across the parking lot from my condo that I had at the time. And she's a rising star. She's got it, boy, let me tell you. But we would not talk about paranormal things unless she would bring something up. I would never bring something up to her and make sure and tell her, do not feel like you have to tell me anything. I don't want to know anything. Let's just go to breakfast or what have you. And she told me the house had a vortex and she tried to close it and it wouldn't close. And I had a lot of odd animal behavior outside of the house. I did not have dogs at the time. If there was any type of irresponsibility in that area going on, I would not have a dog. And there were enough things outside that were really strange. Like I had big birds that would cling on to my screen windows and screech at me, or bobcats that would be like a foot above my head looking down at me. I mean, really weird things. 3 huge coyotes. They were bigger than coyotes. They were almost like wolf size. And they wouldn't move out of my way. I had to call into work and tell them I was going to be late because they wouldn't move out of my way. There's just weird stuff like that. And then I saw little people, like little white people. And my girlfriend saw them too. There were just some really weird things going on. And I had a makeup mirror that lit up. You know, all of us girls had to have evening lighting, office lighting, daytime lighting. I mean, we always had to have our perfect makeup. And it would light up at night. It would go, you know, bing, 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 light up. And it would continually do that until you would say, stop it. Stop it right now. And then it would stop. It would be done. And of course, I would find things on my countertop in the bathroom lined up. I would have them just regularly spread around my countertop, my makeup and whatnot. And then in the morning I'd get up and it would be all lined up on my countertop. And again, stop it. Just don't do it again. But, you know, that didn't work so well. Or I'd have somebody brush my hair. Like if you were walking past somebody and you brush their hair walking past. So that kind of drove me nuts. I sold the travel agency right before the travel agencies became obsolete, but it was not through business acumen. It was just dumb luck. And I went to school to become an esthetician. And I was lucky enough to work at like the only 5-star spa, which was just a mile from my house. And the spa had troubles. Big troubles. They had the little shadow people, and they were little. They were the ones dashing around the spa. And our shaman there was in high demand because he was constantly clearing spirits. He was fixing the mandalas. He cleared the areas that became dim. He would brighten them up. Spas are very mystical and very paranormal. There are lots of things going on there. There's astrology, there's Reiki, chakra, cleansings, numerology, color therapy, labyrinths, all contribute to paranormal events. And in that area, that same area, that carefree area, people would see all kinds of things. You know, they would see these spirits walk by. And a lot of times they would see half the spirit. They wouldn't see the whole spirit. The tourists saw them too. And they would get, you know, really scared. And you just say, oh, well, you know, it's a mystical place. It's something that you would only find in this area, and really try and downplay it because he didn't want to scare him. But it was scary. I didn't like it. I really had it with the spirits. My family spirits, that was fine. They were always hanging around. I'd hear them. That was fine. I could deal with that. They weren't going to harm me. I knew that. I didn't like the people who came in and organized and did those things. About that time, I was fed up with that spa, with the spirits and the scary things that went on and the little people and such a mess. I met and married a man that I had known for about 10 years, and stupid me, I sold my home and I quit my job and I moved into his house, of course, on the mountain, which is called Black Mountain, and it's in Carefree/Cave Creek. And now things really got real. Husband's whole personality would change because we traveled between two homes. And I saw, he wanted to impress me when he first started dating me. He wanted to impress me with his home. And I walked into the kitchen and I turned the corner really fast to go into his living room. And I saw his wife, his deceased wife. And I got in my head that she was so embarrassed that she had got caught spying on me. And she flew into his library. I mean, just flew. I saw it. And I thought, oh, yeah, I probably would have done the same thing. So it was starting. All of a sudden, I thought, oh, no, here we go. But his whole personality would change when he was there. My jewelry would go missing. I would always put it in a certain place, in my bedroom, on my dresser, in a little dish, and then I would find it in my bathroom the next day. And it was in this house on Black Mountain. And it was called Black Mountain because when you drove past it, it was black. And, you know, you think of the desert as just sand and rock. Well, it's green. I mean, it's a ton of cacti, tons of Palo Verde trees, which are trees with green branches, green tree trunks. I mean, there's a lot of mesquite, which is, I don't know if people have heard of mesquite, but it's a type of a wood. Mesquite trees, ironwood trees. I mean, it can be quite lush in some areas, and there are washes, which people try and cross during the rain. And we have a law out here called the stupid motorist law, because people try and cross these washes when it rains and they get flooded out and they have to be rescued by helicopter. So they had to make a law that the drivers have to pay now to get rescued. But anyway, I digress. The mountain is black. I mean, it's lush. I mean, it does have the cacti and it does have the trees and but it's got a pall hanging over it. It always looks gray. The sky always looks gray over it. And it's called Black Mountain for a reason. It always looks black. So that's where one of his houses was, and that's where we lived. And as I said, he always had a personality change when we were there. And I hated it. I just hated it. And it was funny because when we got married, we lived as a 19th century couple. He had his wing of the house. I had my wing of the house. It was a very strange arrangement, and I had never lived like that. But that was the way it was going to be. He was the one in charge, and that was the way it was going to be. So we really never shared anything except the living room and the kitchen and the dining room and the outside patio. But then things started to get nasty. Like I said, his personality would change. Doors would shut. I went into the gift wrap room and the door shut on me. Thank God it didn't lock. I was warned never to swim in the pool. And my girlfriend, the medium, said, don't ever go into that pool, girl. Don't ever go into that pool. And it was a beautiful pool. Don't ever go into that pool. And then there were outdoor lights that would go on, but they could only be turned on from the inside. And there was nobody inside. I mean, there was maybe me or my husband or my stepdaughter or stepson or whoever, but they would go on by themselves. They would just go on. And then one night, my husband was at his other home and I was scared to death. I had my dogs at this point because it was safe there. As far as my dogs went, they were practically Velcroed to me. were never more than 2 feet from me. I smelled gas, and I thought, oh, I better call the gas company. So this big old guy came out, and he had like 25 years at the gas company. And I mean, big old guy. He had to walk the property, and it was daylight, and it was about an acre property, and I felt so sorry for him because it's all cacti, and it's, boulders and whatnot, and he was walking along, and he shut off the pilot lights and did his thing, made sure everything was okay, and then he came in. And his face was green. I'd never, you always hear, his face was green. And you never believe that. You go, yeah, right. Nobody's face gets green. His face was green. And you hear this strong guy. He said, is your house haunted? And I said, what do you say? No. And he said, well, I felt someone following me the whole time I walked. And I went to relight the pilot lights, and they were already relit. And he said someone was breathing down my neck the whole time. And I'm not coming back here. And you have no problems. You have no problems with your gas hookups. There are no problems. And I'm not coming back here. I'm not staying here. I'm going to my mom's. But at that point, I was just so scared. So I went to my mom's. I took, as I called them, my kids, my 2 dogs, and we went and stayed with my mother because it was just way too scary. And like I said, those dogs never got 2 feet from me. If I had to leave and go anywhere, they went with me. Nobody got anywhere near them. And I didn't want to be there. I never wanted to be there. In fact, the other house he had, and I'll tell you about that one, the other house he had was in a different state, but I would rather be there and away from my family than in the house on Black Mountain, the Arizona house. This is really scary. He had a home on an island off of San Diego. He had a home on Coronado. It was huge. I'm talking huge. It's probably about 5,000 square feet. And it was the same deal. It was like 19th century living. I had my own bedroom. I had my own bathroom, library, patio, balcony. Same thing as the one in Arizona. And he had the same arrangement, of course. And this house was also dark and sinister. I don't know what it was about him with those dark houses. I really don't. And suffice it to say, by that time, because of the mode of living that he chose, with living apart, the upheaval in the marriage was tremendous, and it's not appropriate for me to spill any gory details. Suffice it to say, it was really bad. I remember at one point, my dad, who had been deceased probably 20 years by then, came and laid on the bed. I was laying on my side, and he came and laid on his side. He was far enough away from me, but I knew it was him, and he had laid on his side, kind of like having my back, that saying. And I felt so comforted because it was very hellacious at that point. And I wanted to get out. I needed to get out. I had to get out. And things all of a sudden started to happen. And it was really weird. because I would be sleeping in my room. It would be morning time. And I would hear, this is weird too. My bedroom upstairs, it's on the second floor, had a deadbolt on it. Now, I don't know. I don't understand that. It was there when I moved in. So I don't know what that is all about. But anyway, I used it because he would be forgetful and he would forget to shut the garage door, and I didn't want anybody in the house. So I thought, well, I'll just lock myself in my bedroom. And one morning I heard 3 knocks on my bedroom door, and I thought, oh, gee whiz, he's not up this early. It was 8 a.m. He's usually in bed until 11. So I got up and I opened the door, unlocked, opened the door, and nobody was there. I thought, well, that's weird. He couldn't have moved that fast. So I went back to bed. And the next day, same thing. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks. I jumped up because I knew I'd catch him this time. I ran to the door. Nobody there. I thought, well, what the heck? That's really weird. And I couldn't figure it out. And as I said, the house was really big. The property itself wasn't very big, and we lived in a boating community. So we were on a canal, and I could hear the ocean from where we were. So it wasn't really loud. I mean, it was just quiet in the house. I mean, the canal, people weren't zooming up and down the canal at all. And I mean, I knew a door knock. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, something just one off and that was it. So I thought, well, that's really weird. And that night, I don't know what it was. All of a sudden, I heard our tin ceiling, half of it must have been, at least half of it, fell onto our wood floor. And the house was, oh gosh, the ceiling must have been 20 feet high. And the problem was we had no tin ceiling. So I thought, okay, fine. I know what it is. It's a poltergeist. I know exactly what it is. And I thought, okay, I'm going to get you. That morning, the phone rang and my girlfriend, the medium, called up and she said, girl, you better do something about that noisy ghost before it develops its own intelligence. And this is where I think a lot of people need help, because what happens is and it's not always their fault. It might be the previous owner of the house or that previous owner. The poltergeist develops its own intelligence and then becomes reality. Then it can do things. Then it can move objects. Then it can terrorize people. Then it can kill them. Then it can do whatever it's going to do. Then it's a spirit. Then it's a demon. Then it's a whatever it is, whatever it's going to be, if you don't nip it in the bud. And a lot of people can't, because maybe it's been there for 10, 20, 30 years and it's there and nothing's going to, get it out unless you really, really have somebody who knows how to do it. So now this is the 3rd day. And I'm like, okay, I know exactly what it is. And by this time, I thought, okay, I'll get my stuff ready. I got to get everything ready. And I'm also a Reiki master and a Reiki teacher and a crystal Reiki master. And, what else do I do? I don't know. Aromatherapist, all sorts of stuff. Anyway, do a lot of intuition classes, things like that. So I know what I'm dealing with. I knew what I was dealing with the minute I heard the ceiling fall. That wasn't there. And so I got my stuff ready, got my white tray, got my white towel over the tray, got my white candle, got 2 lighters. I learned that really fast because one lighter will fail. Never failed. I mean, it always happens. One lighter will fail. So got 2 lighters, got my sage. Either you use a sage stick and have a bowl so that you can put the sage in the bowl and not have to carry it. And then get yourself a big boy smoky quartz, something that you can really, like a pointed smoky quartz that you can hang on to. And some rose quartz, put that on your tray. Amethyst quartz, put that on your tray. Some Edgar Cayce rose water, which is sold even in Whole Foods. And lavender spray, whatever prayers, if you believe in prayers, which I'm not an organized religion person, but let me tell you, those prayers really came in handy. And for what I found works is St. Michael, and of course my girlfriend's prayers that I've been reciting for years. And then of course just your standard Our Father and whatever else you happen to pray, and go for it. Do it at night, do it in the daytime, open a door so that this thing can get out and start. And all you have to do is treat it like it's a 5-year-old, like it's a 5-year-old child that's throwing a tantrum, and speak to it like that, and don't be afraid, and don't get mad, and just tell it has to go. It has to go. You don't want it. It's not welcome. It's not going to stay there, and that you can see it. I can see you. And that's what I told it. I said, I can see you. You have to go. And then I did see it. And it was a big black rat. Blacker than black. And everybody always says, what is blacker than black? I always thought to myself, what is blacker than black? That never made sense. Now I know. It was blacker than black, and it was big. And I said, I see you. You have to leave right now. Go on. You have to leave. And of course, we had a 2-story, so I had to open one door upstairs, one door down, because I didn't know which way he was going. And he ran through my bedroom, and I slammed that door shut and bolted down the stairs and slammed that front door shut, and then ran upstairs, and it was screeching at my patio door upstairs on my balcony, screeching. And then it screeched. I said, you get out of here. And it was outside, and it screeched all the way down the boating canal. And that's how it went. And then, of course, I do my crystal mandalas, and I keep those as protection. I use my grids all the time. I know crystal people think of that as the 1980s things, but let me tell you, those things really work. They really do. And I have all kinds, and I use them for all kinds of different things. But that thing is real. Those things are real. And that's why I'm not in my house recording it, even though it wasn't in this house. I'm in a new house. I will not talk about it in anybody's house. And in this new house, before I moved in, I opened up every cupboard. Thank God I didn't have anything I had to do as far as moving drawers or anything, and saged everything. And I feel really good here. And it's peaceful, and it's quiet, and my walls are 6 feet high, and I have no idea who my neighbors are. And that's about it. So hopefully everything will be okay.
If you've had a paranormal experience, and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.